To our new seasons of the R&D salons, of the MoMA R&D Salon. This is number 6, actually. And soon enough, we will be putting online some excerpts from the past 5. So some of you will be able to see them, even to see yourself saying, "Mom, hello." No, it's, the videos are really good, and we're actually proud of how it went last year. And this year, we're going to start with, as a first session, the theme of taboos. As you know, MoMA R&D is a newly founded, it's a year-old initiative that is about really the position of the museum in society and in the world. So these salons that are a part of what we do in R&D are, in a way, about what MoMA can do for different fields of human activity. There's a great conference that happens in the Netherlands, that was founded in the Netherlands, but it happens pretty much everywhere. The conference is so-so, the title is great. It's called What Can Design Do for ... So you can fill in the blank, right? And I would like to think of these salons as what can MoMA do for ... So in this case is what can MoMA and museums in general do about taboos in society, and how can they help, museums and cultural institutions can help society move beyond taboos or use taboos in an interesting way. There's a new collaborator for the department, a new research assistant, Aline Rezende. Aline, are you here? No, she's up on top there. And she was writing some notes, and she wrote, "Is taboo a kind of OCD for society, a necessary means of producing cultural cohesion, or something in between?" So what's the role of taboos? And I'm not surprised that everybody responded so vehemently to this theme, because taboos are incendiary unto themselves. There are so many taboos that we can respond to. I just tried to make a list at random of taboos here, and they range from menstruation to necrophagy to, I was thinking about it before, pouring wine backwards. In Italy, if you pour wine backwards, you're insulting people, right? Because that's how, in the Middle Ages, they would use the poison ring. You would open the ring, and you would pour the poison in the cup, and then pour the wine. So it ranges from universal taboos to instead very localized ones. And sometimes, there's that, I think it's HSBC that has those ads that say what is taboo here is instead normal there. So spitting is really not accepted in certain culture and totally normal in others, and so on and so forth. And you could add to this list forever. And I'm sure that you all have your own taboos that you've been thinking of. And tonight we're going to talk only about a few of these taboos. And we're going to just begin to scratch the surface, from menstruation to breastfeeding to racist speech to pedophilia, pornography, masturbation, homosexuality. So we're just going to touch upon a few. But there's so much that we need to talk about. And so what's the purpose of tonight? We will never be able to really exhaust the subject. But what we can do is to have a little more clarity about what, as designers, as artists, as curators, as creators, as anything, what we can do in order to be more mindful of the role of taboos in our world. Taboos can be really quite amazing. I'm thinking of this 1991 Vanity Fair cover, Annie Leibovitz, the photograph Demi Moore pregnant, and then how much that was a groundbreaking cover and how much it's been rehashed in many different ways, from Snooki Snooki to mom photo and comments on late pregnancies. It's amazing how iconic it's become. So sometimes the breaking of taboo is transformed into an iconic moment, and this is another Annie Leibovitz picture that was equally iconic. Actually, if you go and look at the ranking of the most controversial covers ever, this is number 1, and Demi Moore in the United States. Demi Moore is number 2. So it's quite interesting, nudity and pregnancy as taboos that can be changed by thoughtful, mindful art and an approach that is at the same time elegant and also honest. In this case, other taboos that can be broken or not completely. I find the cover of Time magazine extremely disturbing, not because I have a problem with breastfeeding, but because of the age of the child. And I think that it's very interesting to see how breastfeeding is considered taboo in some society as being viewed in public, breastfeeding in public and not in others, but there are some nuances. On the right, you see instead Vogue Netherlands, and frankly, I find that even more disturbing because the model is so corpse-like. Well, of course, taboos can get you really in trouble. We're seeing here a picture of John Galliano. And in a way, political incorrectness is a form of taboo. I'm thinking of many cases in the past few years, from Larry Summers talking about women scientists to other forms of speech that went too far because they really crashed against some very, very strongly formed opinions in society. Well, anti-Semitism is really quite untouchable, and the way John Galliano went about it was a classical example of how to crash and burn in front of a taboo. Other taboos that for us that are not taboos elsewhere, the case of children brides in Saudi, girls that get married when they are 8 and sometimes die of internal injuries because the marriage is consumed at that age. Or, for instance, taboos that are maybe a little less lethal, a little less disturbing, but still quite odd, the maid cafes and the male host services in Japan. So at the top, you see the maid cafes, but what is interesting is that the 2 pictures top left are guys dressed up as maids, and instead, only the one on the right is a real girl. And it's quite interesting because I'm sure that to many of us, Japanese culture is an endless mystery when it comes to its handling of what is taboo here and instead is not taboo there. And these pictures are also from Aline, who lived in Japan for quite a long time. Regarding male escorts, so interesting. There's a documentary, if you haven't seen it, that is all about that. It's not about sex, it's just about companies. It's about these young girls, very attractive girls that work, actually professional women that work too hard to really have a relationship, and they just want good company. So it's puzzling more than disturbing sometimes, but taboos are really localized in this case. Art and taboos. There's an exhibition of Balthus right now at the Met, and we know that the most famous or infamous painting by Balthus is the Guitar Lesson 1934, and it's a painting that's been shown twice and that is not shown now, that you cannot see at the exhibition at the Metropolitan. But the interesting thing is that top left you see the street, which is in MoMA's collection, and I was talking to the conservators of MoMA who think that, see the girl that is on the left-hand side that is being pursued by a guy that has his hand in a strategic position. Well, the conservatives argue that the extra slip dress was added that doesn't seem like it was coherent with the initial painting. They are saying that probably it was Balthus himself that added it, but they don't really know. Only they think it's almost extraneous, very interestingly so. So sometimes there's a correction that happens en route. Either, you can go on, there are so many artists that broke taboos at different kinds or that tackled taboos at different times in history. This is, of course, the Made in Heaven series when Jeff Koons married Cicciolina and they did all these porn images, and it's interesting to see the same collection shown in an Upper East Side gallery, the Luxembourg and Dayan Gallery in 2010. So interesting how it's still a taboo, but it's more of a pruriginous taboo, not something really that goes and changes the world and society. While Piss Christ, which as a Catholic I've always found an amazingly glorious depiction of the crucifix, has to me it's almost like an explosion of glory, but the fact that the materials used are actually urine makes it so controversial and so incendiary for so many people. When institutions deal with taboos, they sometimes get in trouble. Of course, you're looking here at the most famous episode in which the NEA, and in particular Jesse Helms, closed an exhibition at the Corcoran in 1989 that celebrated the work of Robert Mapplethorpe. And the exhibition had its whole series of also the flowers and, his self-portrait over there, which I always found one of the strongest depictions of homosexuality at that particular moment in history, was in a separate room, but nonetheless, the Christian right went berserk and had the exhibition closed. And 20 years later, there was an exhibition at the ICA in Philadelphia celebrating this groundbreaking moment in our history. I would like also to remind everybody about the Sensation show in Brooklyn, at the Brooklyn Museum in 1999, where the Holy Virgin Mary by Christophili was displayed, and it had also the famous elephant dung parts that so incensed Rudolph Giuliani. And Rudy Giuliani threatened the Brooklyn Museum with the withdrawal and withholding of their public funds. The exhibition went on anyway, but it was another moment in which a taboo was clearly becoming an issue of like free speech and also free, just because public money was allotted to the particular museum. There's been other moments in history where taboos were broken. This is Opinião 65, an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in Rio, where Helio Oiticica, that is going to have an exhibition soon also here at MoMA, brought in inhabitants of the favelas, in particular the Samba School of the Mangueira, to actually show more of what they were doing. And the Parangoles, that is the name of this particular costume and this particular dance, were trying to almost invade the sacred space. You know, the descamisados, the miserables, the poor coming from the favelas invading the temples of culture. It was really unacceptable, and they were pushed outside, and the performance went on the outside. So in this case, the institution abided by the taboo. This is Yayoi Kusama, the grand orgy to awaken the dead at MoMA in 1969. She didn't tell anybody that she was about to do that, at least nobody at MoMA. She sent press releases and invitations to everybody she knew, and then together with her friends, she came into MoMA, got naked, and went into the fountain. And it was this amazing performance with the security guards going crazy and the whole museum going crazy, but hey, it was too late. Typical Kusama. In this case, the Hans Hacke cancellation at the Guggenheim was another instance instead of the museum really pulling back. The show was canceled for political reasons. And it's really interesting because one of the taboos that seemed to really be very typical in some instances of mishaps that have happened, especially in the United States, but also elsewhere, is politics, but usually it's politics connected to either religion or money. And I know that we're going to talk about it afterwards, and I'm really looking forward to it. MoMA is also culpable, and several times. This is the Art Workers Coalition posters Q and Babies, A and Babies. I don't know if you remember, it was about My Lai massacre. And it's Mike Wallace that had asked this soldier that was part of the battalion that actually made that massacre happen, said, did you kill civilians? And babies? And the answer is, and babies. So it was really a very strong poster done by the Art Workers Coalition with the original photograph by Heberle. And the Museum of Modern Art had actually committed to paying and distributing this poster, but then at the last moment pulled out because of remonstration from the trustees and from some of the people connected to it. And it was a difficult moment. The poster was anyway produced and it was distributed, not by MoMA, but it entered the whole general discourse of the war in Vietnam. The same Art Workers Coalition member, I mean, one of the members was Tony Shafrazi, and he's the one that in 1974, a few years later, defaced Guernica by writing on it, lies kill all, I think it was. I always get confused on, lies kill all. Or kill lies all. So it was another way to actually demonstrate, and this was because a particular soldier, a particular military had been, Cullen, he had been set free. And then the paint was removed, so everything was okay, but also that was at MoMA. Sometimes institutions deal with taboos in a really weird way. This is Ulena Abramovich, a great performance that happened first in 1977 in a gallery where the only door was manned and womaned by Marina and Ulay, naked, and people had to go through. When the exhibition happened at MoMA in 2010, besides the fact that it was not anymore Marina and Ulay, people had a choice. There was one door with the naked people and another door that instead was stained. Nobody, you could go through. Now, the moment you give people a way to escape their facing taboos, they're going to choose the easy way in most cases. So I felt that that was still, and I know that also other people at the museum feel that way, including the curator, so it's not something that is new. It was a way to deal with a societal situation that in a way was a compromise. Of course, then there are institutions, there are moments in which institutions really take the bull by the horn and the ball in their court, and they run with it. This is the famous black male show that Thelma Golden organized at the Whitney Museum of American Art in 1994, in which she tackled head-on all the stereotypes and the cliches, good and bad, about black males by asking some great artists. You know, one of the ones where you can see Chris O'Feely over there. I'm sorry, you know what I'm going to say? It's not Chris O'Feely. You can see some Glenn Ligon over there. It was really quite historical in the way it dealt with taboos and stereotypes. And you know, the borderline between taboos and stereotypes sometimes is very thin. So a MoMA episode is the instance in which the curator of media and performance here, Sabine Breitwiese, last year, or a year and a half ago, together with Glenn Lowry, decided to acquire David Wojnarowicz, I never learned to pronounce it, the video, the short, A Fire in the Belly, that had been actually banned from the Portrait Museum in DC because there are ants that are crawling over a crucifix. The crucifix really is always incendiary. And you know, Q and Babies, A and Babies is now part of the MoMA collection. So I like the fact that mistakes are made and mistakes are acknowledged and corrections are taken when possible. So this poster is now part of the collection. Museums deal with taboos in very weird ways. I mean, you've already heard me talk about the video games that are now in the MoMA collection, but I never would think that video games were taboo, but they were so to some art critics. You know? So some art critics think that museums are untouchable spaces where certain rules have to be respected. People don't touch works, and video games are not part of the collection. And indeed, there are still some taboos that remain in museums. For instance, in the architecture and design collection, especially in the design collection, we do not acquire guns. It's not something that's written in the bylaws of the museum, but we just don't. There are, of course, depictions of guns and other weapons in the painting and sculpture and all other representational departments. But because in the design department what you see is what you get, and the acquisition is connected to the function and the position in the world of the object, objects that kill are kind of frowned upon or like pushed away. Instead, I think it's the Design Museum that just acquired a Kalashnikov, and the Victoria and Albert Museum acquired the 3D printed gun. I am a little more critical of the 3D printed gun because aesthetically it doesn't have that much heft. But the AK-47, because of functionality, is a completely different icon. And if I were less susceptible to those taboos, I would probably push it. But you know what? I succumb to the taboo myself. And on the left-hand side, a work that was in the exhibition Talk to Me in 2011 that really ignited a lot of criticism and a lot of love. You know, love from my side, but some people were really incensed because it's a contraption that actually allows men to try the whole experience of having their period, including cramps and blood between the legs. So it really is interesting how some taboos remain forever. So what we're going to talk about tonight, you already know it because you got the email, you got the questions, you got the readings, and probably you have a lot of questions yourself. We're going to tackle a lot of different questions that are connected to what cultural institutions can do to help society deal with taboos and also to understand better taboos in different parts of the world. And to do so, we have three great speakers, and they are in order of appearance here. Severin Fowles is an archaeological anthropologist at Barnard College, a professor there, and he is specialized, well, of course, as an anthropologist, he studies material culture, and in particular, the relationship between icon and territory, and his zone of specialty is northern New Mexico. Then we're going to have Mona El-Tahawy. Mona is a great journalist and writer and public speaker. She was based in New York, before that in Cairo. Now she's based again in Cairo. And she was known during the Arab Spring as the woman that explained Egypt to the West. And that was the good side of her activity in the Arab Spring, because she was also beaten and sexually assaulted by the police during those terrible days. And besides all that, she's also really studying taboos and other aspects of Muslim culture. And she's trying to get into lawsuits as often as she can. She's going to tell you about it. You know, she's a rabble rouser. Last but not least, our own Tom Finkelpearl, I say our own for the art community. He's now the executive director of the Queen's Museum. Before that, he was at MoMA PS1. Before that, he was at the Percent for Art and Skowhegan. But he's been in the art world for a very long time, always being attentive to at the public aspect of institutions. And you know, the Queen's Museum is really the center of the universe, at least in New York City. And we're going to hear from the three of them, and then, of course, you're going to have a chance to really speak at length and ask also questions. I'm going to start with Severin. Severin Fowles.
Thank you.